Hi, and welcome to another episode of The Lowest Crime, where we take a deep dive into some of the most shocking and infamous true crime cases from the Netherlands. I am Eline, and today we're covering a case that took place in the town of Zoetermeer. It's a tragic story that touched not only a seemingly ordinary family, but the entire country. Starting with the sudden disappearance of a family, initially seeming like a routine missing persons case, quickly spiraled into a harrowing revelation of murder and betrayal. This is the story of the Harteveld family murders, a case that gripped the Netherlands in 2005. Before we begin, please be advised that today's episode contains descriptions of violence, the murder of a woman and a young child, and other sensitive topics that may be disturbing to some listeners. And as always, I'll try my best to bring you all the known facts, but as an amateur podcast creator, there is always a chance of me making a mistake. Before we dive in, I do have a quick announcement. From now on, episodes will no longer be released weekly, but every other week, still on Thursdays. Creating these episodes takes a lot of time and effort, and this change will allow me to keep delivering the quality content that you all enjoy without burning out. I really appreciate you understanding and your continued support. So, let's get into the story. In 2005, Richard Harteveld, who was 33 at the time, and his wife Claudia, 31, lived in Zoetermeer, a quiet suburb just outside of Den Haag. The town itself is a peaceful place, known for its middle-class suburban neighborhoods. Richard and Claudia, together with their young daughters, Marieke, of 5, and Charlotte, who was 3, resided in a modest but well-maintained apartment in Haverakker, in a family-friendly neighborhood. The Harteveld family was what many would describe as picture-perfect. Richard worked as an IT specialist at the renowned hotel school in Den Haag, where he managed the institution's computer systems. He was described by colleagues as quiet, reserved, but very reliable. Richard wasn't the kind of person to make waves. He mostly kept to himself, although he was always approachable and friendly. He frequently spoke about his 2 daughters, often mentioning how proud he was of them. Claudia was also very well respected in her professional life. She worked as a kindergarten teacher at the Maria Bernadette Catholic Primary School in the nearby town of Leidschendam. Claudia was a beloved figure at the school, known for her passionate dedication to her young students. She was particularly well regarded for her ability to connect with children, and many of the parents appreciated her immensely. Claudia's co-workers remembered her as kind, a caring woman who always had a smile on her face. But it wasn't just in their professional lives that the Harteveld family seemed to excel. Claudia was an active presence online, posting frequently on schoolbank.nl, a Dutch social networking site, where she openly shared how happy she was with her family. She described her life as fulfilling and mentioning how proud she was of her 2 daughters and her marriage to Richard, which had begun 7 years earlier in 1998. Richard too enjoyed his family life, even if he wasn't quite as open about it online. He enjoyed cars, computers, and sports, and like many Dutch families, he loved taking vacations abroad. He posted occasionally, writing about the joy of spending time with his 2 lieve schatten, his beloved young girls, Marieke and Charlotte. On the morning of April 11th, 2005, Richard Harteveld left for work as usual. It was a typical Monday morning, and there was nothing to suggest that anything was wrong. He said goodbye to his wife, Claudia, and their daughters, Marieke and Charlotte, before heading off to his job in Den Haag. Claudia's day was expected to follow a predictable routine as well. She would drop off Marieke at kindergarten and Charlotte at the nursery, as she did every weekday. But by that evening, everything had changed. Richard tried calling Claudia's mobile phone when he was at work, but it went straight to voicemail. He also attempted to call the home phone, but there was no answer there either. When Richard wasn't able to reach Claudia when he was at work, He decided to ask a neighbor to check on the house. The neighbor entered and found nothing out of place, except that Claudia's bicycle was still parked outside with a flat tire. This was unusual, as Claudia typically used her bike to take the children to school and to nursery. The only things missing from the house were the jackets of the two girls, which indicated that they had left, but no one knew where they had gone or why. When Richard returned home from work, he found the house eerily quiet. Claudia and the children weren't there. At first he thought that maybe they had gone out, but when hours passed without any word from them, Richard, accompanied by Claudia's mother, went to the local police station at 7:30 p.m. to officially report Claudia and the girls as missing. The police took the report seriously, but at that point there were no immediate signs of foul play. Claudia hadn't taken her phone, her wallet, or any other personal belongings. Everything was still in the house except for the children's jackets. The following day, April 12th, the police launched a full-scale investigation into the disappearance of Claudia, Marieke and Charlotte. They quickly issued a missing persons alert to the public, providing detailed descriptions of the three. Claudia was described as a 31-year-old woman, about 1 meter 75 centimeters tall, with long chestnut brown hair. She was slim and likely wearing a khaki-colored jacket. Marieke, the 5-year-old, had striking blonde hair and was last seen wearing an orange fluorescent jacket. Charlotte, just 3, was also blonde, and her favorite stuffed animal, a small dog, was missing as well. The disappearance of the Harteveld family immediately drew attention from the media and the local community. Friends and family, neighbors, they were all baffled. The Hartevelds were well known in the neighborhood, and although they were somewhat private, they were considered kind. Many neighbors saw Claudia and the girls walk to school or nursery each day, but beyond pleasantries, few had any close relationship with the family. Within hours of the disappearance being reported, the police began to receive tips. Over 50 pieces of information came in from the public, some of which seemed promising. One tip suggested that Claudia and the children had been seen at Palestine train station, boarding a train towards Den Haag. But after reviewing security footage from the station and conducting interviews, the police determined that this tip was false. Meanwhile, police officers conducted door-to-door inquiries, asking neighbors if they had seen anything unusual that morning. Many neighbors recalled seeing Claudia just days earlier walking with her daughters, but none had seen or heard anything suspicious on the day of the disappearance. As part of the search effort, police deployed helicopters to scan nearby parks and wooded areas, including Westerpark, a large green space in Zoetermeer. They hoped to find some trace of Claudia and the girls, but nothing turned up. The search was thorough, but ultimately fruitless. In the days that followed, the lack of concrete evidence led the case to grow increasingly mysterious. Claudia's family became desperate. Her sister, Jacqueline van Veen, made a public plea on April 15th, asking Claudia to contact them if she was safe. In her emotional appeal, Jacqueline said, "Hey lieve zus, als het kan, laat dan iets van je horen. Niets moet, alles mag. Dan zijn we gerustgesteld en komt de rest uiteindelijk vanzelf goed." This roughly translates to, "Hey sweet sister, if possible, please let us hear from you. In any way, shape or form, anything you can give us. Then we're reassured and the rest will fall into place." The family kept hoping, against the growing sense of dread, that Claudia and the girls were still alive. But as time passed, the case grew only darker. There were no sightings, no ransom demands, and no communication from Claudia. The entire situation left the police and the public wondering, how could a mother and her 2 young daughters vanish without a trace? By April 21st, after more than a week of searching to no avail, the police turned their focus to the Hartevelds family home. They had already conducted an initial search, but had found no obvious signs of foul play. However, given the lack of any other leads, they decided to conduct a more thorough forensic investigation. And what they discovered changed everything. Forensic experts found traces of blood in the house, specifically in the bedrooms and in the trunk of Richard's car. The blood had been cleaned, but not well enough to escape forensic detection. The discovery of these bloodstains turned the investigation from a missing persons case into something far more sinister. With this new evidence, the police brought Richard in for further questioning. Up until that point, Richard had been treated as a concerned husband and father. He had cooperated fully with the investigation, participating in searches, distributing flyers, and sending out messages to friends and family. But now, the police were beginning to suspect that Richard knew way more than he had been letting on. Under intense questioning, Richard's story began to unravel. And then, in the early hours of April 22nd, he confessed and shared the location of his family's bodies. The police brought in search dogs and a helicopter circled overhead. They knew exactly where to dig because Richard had provided an eerily accurate sketch of the location. As they started to remove the dirt, they uncovered something awful: the tiny knee of one of the daughters. Soon after, they also found a stuffed animal, one that had belonged to Charlotte, the 3-year-old. Then came the sight of a garbage bag, tightly wrapped and taped shut, containing Claudia's body, folded up inside. The sight was absolutely devastating. Richard's confession was as shocking as it was horrifying. On the night of April 6th, just hours after he had kissed his daughters goodnight, Richard had brutally murdered his wife and his children. Richard explained how, while Claudia was sleeping, he struck her over the head with a blunt object, most likely a baseball bat. The blow rendered her unconscious, and while she lay defenseless, Richard strangled her to death. But he didn't stop there. He then went into the bedrooms of his daughters, Marieke and Charlotte, and smothered them while they were asleep. Neither child stood a chance. After murdering his entire family, Richard wrapped their bodies in garbage bags and loaded them into the trunk of his car. He took along his youngest daughter Charlotte's stuffed animal, some shovels to dig a grave, and possibly a murder weapon, though it was never found. In the early morning hours, while the town of Zoetermeer slept, Richard drove more than 100 kilometers to a remote forest near the village of Alphen in Noord-Brabant, an area familiar to him from his childhood, as it was near a camping ground where he had spent time as a boy. Once there, Richard dug a shallow grave in the forest. He placed the bodies of Claudia, Marieke and Charlotte inside, and covered them with a thin layer of dirt and leaves. The grave was so shallow that the bodies were barely concealed. But he didn't have much time. He quickly returned home that night to clean up all the traces of the crime, and he did so meticulously. By the time morning came, he had already showered and informed his boss that he would be slightly late for work. He also called in to report his child as sick at the school, walked his dog, and then went to his job in Den Haag. None of the colleagues noticed anything unusual about him. When he returned home, he continued cleaning everything thoroughly. The hallway, the master bedroom, even cutting a piece out from the mattress. And even worse, he used his daughter's drawings to cover up some of the bloodstains on the wall that he couldn't get out. He calmly disposed of their jackets, lunch boxes, Claudia's keys and shoes, and the duvet cover in garbage bags. That same Monday morning, Richard placed breadcrumbs on his children's breakfast plates and left them on the kitchen counter to make it look like they had had breakfast. Later, from work, he called Claudia's phone several times. He even asked the neighbor to check on them. By the afternoon, he informed his mother-in-law that his wife and 2 girls had disappeared. After making a few phone calls, he finally reported them missing at 7:30 in the evening, mentioning that he had seen his family earlier that morning at breakfast. The question on everyone's mind, once Richard's confession became public, was why? Why would a man who appeared to be a loving husband and father commit such a horrible, unthinkable crime? As investigators dug deeper into Richard's life, they uncovered a secret that few had suspected. Richard had been leading a double life for years. Despite his outward appearance as a devoted family man, Richard had been engaging in multiple extramarital affairs. He had met many of these women online, through chat rooms and the once popular MSN Messenger. One of the most serious relationships he had was with a Polish woman whom he had met online as well. She was scheduled to come visit him in a few days following the murders. Richard had promised her a future together, claiming he was single and available. To maintain the illusion of this new life, Richard believed that he had to eliminate his family. Rather than confront Claudia with the truth or ask for a divorce, Richard chose to murder her and their 2 children. In the weeks and months leading up to the murders, Richard had been meticulously planning his double life. He had created multiple email accounts, maintained separate mobile phones, and fabricated elaborate stories about work trips to cover his absences. He had even deleted his entire MSN Messenger contact lists shortly before the murders, severing ties with the woman he had been seeing online when he felt like the police had eyes on him. For those who knew Richard, the revelation of his double life was shocking. He had always seemed so quiet, so unassuming. No one had suspected that he was hiding such a dark secret. The discovery of the bodies of Claudia, Marieke and Charlotte left the community of Zoetermeer in mourning. The peaceful town, where nothing like this had ever happened before, was now the center of one of the most horrific crimes in Dutch history. On May 11th, 2005, a large funeral was held for Claudia and her daughters. Hundreds of people attended, including family members, friends, neighbors, and Claudia's colleagues from the school where she had taught. A candlelight vigil was organized in Zoetermeer, where the community came together to remember the innocent lives they had lost. For Claudia's family, the pain was unimaginable. They had trusted Richard, believing him to be a loving husband and father. They had welcomed him into their lives and never suspected that he was capable of such violence. The betrayal cut deep. In the months that followed, the Harteveld family murders ignited a national conversation in the Netherlands about domestic violence, mental health, and the hidden lives that people sometimes lead. How could someone like Richard, a man who seemed so ordinary, commit such an atrocity? And how had he managed to hide his dark side for so long? Richard Harteveld was eventually sentenced to life in prison for the murders of his wife and daughters. His confession, combined with the overwhelming forensic evidence, left no room for doubt. But for Claudia's family and for the community of Zoetermeer, no sentence could ever undo the pain and loss that Richard had caused. The scars left by this tragedy would last a lifetime. Thank you all so much for joining me for this episode. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review. And also, don't forget to follow The Lowest Crime on Instagram to find all images related to the case. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.